All right, we're going to go to Acts chapter 20.
Proverbs 18.
21st chapter of Isaiah.
First Chronicles, and we're going to be in the 16th chapter this evening.
Obadiah. 141st Psalm this morning.
My name is Dorian Whitson. I started attending Parkland Chapel at, I think, 5 years old.
My name is Max McKinney, and I started attending Parkland Chapel when I was 2.5 years old.
My name is Caleb Speth, and I believe I started attending Parkland Chapel at 2.5 years old.
My name is Dave Talley. I started attending Parkland Chapel when I was 3 years old.
My name is Joseph Samples, and I started attending Parkland Chapel when I was about 2 years old.
My name is Samuel Woodson, and I started attending at 2 years old.
My name is Audrey Williams, and I started at Parkland Chapel when I was 5 years old.
My name is Anna McKinney, and I started attending Parkland Chapel whenever I was about 6 months old.
I'm Emma Williams, and I started attending Parkland Chapel around 3.
I'm Ari Woodson, and I started attending, we'll go with 5, I'm not sure. I'm gonna say 5 years old.
We're some of the original kids from the Parkland Chapel Children's Church. Some of us were here in 2005 at the very beginning. Some of us dragged along a little later, but yeah, we're here to share our time in the last 20 years being here at Parkland Chapel.
Probably some of my only early childhood memories are Parkland Chapel. Because, we don't really remember much at 2 years old. So like you said, yeah, it's created my family dynamic. Mike's mom gave my mom the call. Mike started a church in his basement. We just went to see what it was about. And my dad, still to this day, says, that guy was pretty good. That's how they shaped our upbringing, because it wasn't even forced upon us as children to go to church. That was just a family thing for us.
Seeing Parkland Chapel grow from the beginning, my parents were kind of thrust into a position where we didn't miss many Sundays because we made up a good chunk of the church population in the first year or two. And so God kind of used that as a way to kind of ingrain in me and Anna that church is not something you're gonna skip. You're there for a reason, and you're there to learn. And there's teachers there that were then there to meet us at that level and ingrain in us just the importance of being at church and also fostering our relationships with the Lord.
I guess with our family, what else would we have done? Because mom and dad were serving, and I think that's true for everyone here. Mom and dad were serving. What else would we have done? But the expectation of going to church, of being of the people of God, with them and in God's Word, goes a long way to establishing that in our lives going forward, in our families and our hearts to serve, and what that looks like for all of us that went through Parkland Chapel.
Not only did it kind of, introduce me and make me familiar to the people who make up, the church family, but it also taught me at a young age that, believing in God, Jesus, isn't just, a personal thing. It means, helping others and showing how God has impacted you to others by helping them.
I think just the spiritual fruit that has come from it, and not just from our parents, though that's the biggest exposure. The benefit of being a small child in this church is not only did we get to see it grow over time, but we also got to see all of the elders and our parents just mature and guide us. And so I know many of the traits that people have here are because of what they experienced growing up in Parkland Chapel.
So that was, it was 2006 when I started coming, so I was really young, but even from my earliest memories, I got to grow up kind of seeing the change in my parents, probably more so than my brother, because I'm a good chunk older than him, but I got to watch my dad soften over the years. I've gotten to watch both my parents grow in wisdom and watch them grow closer. It's a beautiful thing. It probably, without it, I don't know what the family dynamic would have looked like, but it definitely changed our family for the better.
There were definitely some early people that were wonderful for all of our walks that aren't here today. So Russ, for example, he was our door greeter, and I'm sure a lot of kids were climbing on top of him. A lot of them are present. I know he was a big factor for all of us.
Jumping on top of Audrey's, I mean, Kenny was a huge friendly face that we saw basically every Sunday. He made cakes. He was just always there to help greet people. And he was a really awesome face to see through all the years that he was with us.
He always had a smile. Yeah, he just loved helping. Like even baking cakes. Like you could always see a smile when he was walking in with the cake every morning, knowing he was giving it to the kids, serving in that way.
Dude had swag too. He was always wearing those, I don't even know what to call them, but those cool hats. He'd have long shorts, high socks. Dude was the man.
And the sock of choice is different every time.
He's nice. Shout out Kenny.
Yeah, I just add on, he's just so sweet. He was just always super friendly and joyful. He was just never, you could just never tell like if he was going through anything. He had a lot of like, obviously a lot of like illnesses and things going on in his life, but when he entered like our church, he was never showing of any of that. He was just so happy to be here and happy to be with us. He loved us and loved the kids and super excited to always be present with us.
Two families that I remember in children's church, like teaching whenever we were younger, was your parents and then your parents, the Samples and the Williamses. They were both really good teachers. That's how I remember learning about like Esther and a lot of the books in the New Testament. Like I remember specifically your dad was talking about like how Jesus wrote in the sand. It was whenever we had two different buildings.
Lance and Vanessa.
Yeah, Lance and Vanessa.
Yeah. They're great.
Yeah.
Oh, those were good.
I think early on, Brian and Lynette Woodson in Children's Church made a forever long impact on just the early development of my life.
There was
And the patience that was brought on by Caleb's Beth. He never stopped moving. We're talking.
I can picture that. That was in this room too.
I was one with some crazy ADHD, but she would, you know, drill me on my, not forcefully or angrily, but she got down to getting me to memorize Bible verses that, you know, would have been a struggle for me with a lot of other teachers. But her style of teaching and the way that she pulled it off with somebody like me that was a little bit more difficult to get a hold of was impactful because, you know, by the grace of God, years later, not even practicing, I've been able to recite some verses from her just out of the blue.
Anyone and everyone knows? Parts of it. I have my little light.
You guys remember the Spanish?
It's your birthday, you can cry if you want to.
Hallelujah.
Greater is yours, Gloria. Hallelujah. Jesus, Prince de la Paz, Gloria. Hallelujah. Jesus, Prince de la Paz, Gloria. Hallelujah.
I remember the orphanage we sponsored in India. Yeah, no chance. But Dad,
Oh no.
Dad we had a quilt, and Dad made a song of all the names. Yeah, the song changed every time. You know, the melody was not the same, but the words were sung.
Old Testament.
Oh, that song, yeah. The books of the Bible.
Jesus driving a bus.
That's how I memorized the books of the Old Testament.
I can't even remember that until I said it.
I still sing it in my head, actually, whenever I think about the order. Yeah. Old Testament.
Probably a song.
It was a
Probably
silly
a
song.
subliminal song that was
Go.
introduced.
Never sung the same way twice. Go to the ant, you sluggard. That was one that
Remember that one?
Yeah.
Go to the ant, you sluggard.
It was my early days getting to play music was when I was 11 years old. Brian would let me play bass with him. And that is a good learning exercise because Brian never does a song the same way twice. And so it gets you really sharpen your skills there.
I'm pretty sure that we had a stage right here. And this stage, this whole building was just open, and there was a stage here, and it only went halfway across the room. So with all the sound equipment up there and what we had, with a TV and everything having to duck, when we introduced Little D to come and help us on the worship, I frequently ducked my head, and I probably have some nicks here and there, but yeah, that was fun.
Well, they just made it fun, and we always have like rubber duckies. There was always like, it was like a reward, but it was just more, but it just made it more impactful. There's also, obviously, everybody has a different way of learning, and they just were very intentional. Both Brian and Lynette were very intentional with each individual kid.
Definitely goes down as one of the greatest teachers I've ever had.
And they're still teaching.
It's crazy to think just how many kids have gone through Parkland Chapel and their first real formative experiences in their Christian faith is with Brian and Lynette, helping them go along in that. And so it's really awesome to see just how long that's been going on. It's truly awesome.
It's more almost like a friendship bond now, you know. I would definitely seek to them for advice, and I have. Talking to them now, you know, especially Brian and Lynette Woodson, I'm glad they don't still communicate with me in a way towards like I'm, you know, still one of their students. They were, you know, respectful of my age, my maturity, my intelligence, and when I have conversations with them now, it's like, you know, we can really dig deep on the same level.
I think another relationship that oftentimes we take for granted in Parkland Chapel is Mike and Lucinda. Just the capacity that we have to talk so openly with our pastor, and just his willingness to talk with us on a weekly basis. And Lucinda, you know, when the church first started, I mean, she was the only form of watching kids that we had. And so it really is, I mean, it's like an aunt and uncle nowadays. Where I'm just so close with them through the years.
That's been really impactful, at least in like the later half of it, because he kind of took over youth. And I would say they've really, it was a lot smaller back then, much like what the church was, so they really helped grow it out.
The Mingies were a big part, especially in the youth group. When I first came, it was me and Abby, two tiny 6th graders, and then everyone else was high schoolers. And Mike, Mingy, and Kelly, they would make you feel included, even though you were 2 feet shorter than everyone else.
Yeah, I think just the faithfulness of so many faces and families, and you know, Brian and Lynette are our mom and dad, but you know, even if we had to learn some Bible verses more forcibly, you know, there's still a relationship where, you know, we can take these issues of our walk to, you know, them as our parents as Woodsons, but then, you know, the McKinneys, the Williams, you know, the Samples. I've done a lot of stuff with Jason, you know, the Tallies, the Spets, and just now being an adult, talking to them much more on your level, still realizing like, oh, the wisdom you had that was like the only wisdom that I knew. You're so much taller and older than me, is still like wisdom I can go to, and yet like having some understanding that came from learning from those people, and that their faces are still around, pouring into the next generation of students.
First time that I realized that what Parkland Chapel was doing was not really the norm is whenever I went to college and I started kind of looking around for some churches, and there were a few that I noticed that are like, these are essentially the same sermon every week, touching on really just highlighted sections of the New Testament rather than actually digging into Scripture. And you need a whole Bible to make a whole Christian. And so I think that a lot of churches, no shade, but I think that a lot of churches do miss out on a lot of setup for the New Testament by kind of glossing, I guess, through some of the Old Testament. And also, like Joe said, meeting Christians where they're at is definitely something that Parkland Chapel does. I mean, in the beginning years, we had Russ as our door greeter, and he was wearing cutoffs and had his armpit hair out while he was leaning on the door frame. We met people with open arms, and so I think that's something that definitely sets Parkland Chapel apart.
I appreciate that, you know, it's open really to anyone, however they are. You know, we don't really have like a stuffy dress code or anything like that. You know, we're really a church trying to appeal to the community that we find ourselves in.
I think another benefit of Parkland Chapel is, in addition to the verse-by-verse reading, Mike gives us a lot of historical context, which really does make the Bible come alive. You know, these people aren't on pedestals, and Mike makes that very clear. And, you know, Moses was an amazing guy, but even he made mistakes, and he's not going to gloss over that.
I would say one thing that I noticed probably a year or two ago is like the people here, they just walk like Jesus would, you know. Like, of course, they all make mistakes, but to see other people sacrificing a lot of personal stuff to come here and serve, lift others up above themselves was something I'd never seen outside of church. And of course, being here for so long, I always saw it, but I never recognized the two were so big. But just seeing how a lot of the leaders and servants here just want to see you doing honestly better than they are, you know, will sacrifice a lot just to help one or more people out. So it's definitely not the norm that you see out in the world there.
Like, I've not had a lot of exposure to many other styles of teaching. I've gone to this church my whole life, and any church I've visited has been another Calvary Chapel, and so it's a similar format. So I've had very little exposure to other styles. But I notice when you have verse by verse versus a topical sermon, you are getting, as Audrey and Max both touched on, you're getting the whole picture. You're getting the flaws of the characters, you're getting historical context, you're getting the meaning and how it applies now.
By going through the entire Bible, going through it chapter by chapter, we're able to kind of get at a depth when it comes to kind of analyzing Scripture that I think a lot of churches miss out on by doing sermons that really just, you know, analyze individual passages or verses rather than, you know, a whole section.
It's a pretty good coincidence that Jordan just talked about the 9 distinctives that Parkland Chapel has. But another thing that I think I never really connected the dots until Jordan said it was Mike sits down to teach, and he's not preaching at you. He's not trying to reach an emotional, just reach your heart, but he's trying to reach your mind, and that informs your heart in order to just make your decisions on be informed in your decisions in a biblical level. And so Mike he isn't preaching, he's going through it with you and just teaching through the Bible, and that's incredibly important for the Christian walk.
So I really didn't notice a difference just because I was probably ignorant to the fact that Parkland Chapel was so different until I moved away to college, and I tried out a couple churches until I got into a different Christian group, and I was just kind of met with like legalism and a lot of like what they would say was mercy but was kind of just really hateful, and it was just really twisted, and there was just a lot of things that was taught to me, and I just had to be untaught by Lana or my mom or Lynette, and there was just a lot of things I had to call back home to a lot of like the moms here that I trusted, and because it was hard coming from something so loving and gracious and merciful like Parkland Chapel to go to another church and try not to compare them to Parkland Chapel because it's different, and you're not going to find a perfect church when you come from something that you want to consider perfect, and then you're kind of met with something that's just different. But that's what I think when I truly like kind of realized something was different, when I went to a church and it was very twisted and legalistic was kind of the word that was kind of just a lot of people was just kind of telling me like what it was, until college was over, moved back, and kind of just got to go back and, like Caleb said, join Bible studies, got a new mentor that was pointing me back to God, pointing me back to the gospel, merciful, gracious type of thing, and forgiving. And there was just, I was not met with a whole lot of that at certain churches that I was a part of in that body down there. And so that was something that was completely different versus Parkland Chapel.
I know for me, I was kind of spoiled with Parkland Chapel. I did not go to a Bible school, and when I left, finding a church that resembled Parkland Chapel in a way was very difficult, and there were wonderful churches there, but what's so special about Parkland Chapel is that not only are you taught in such a complicated way, yet so simplistic, but the people there, like Mike, they're not going to be preaching down to you. And so they meet you at your level. And another really cool thing about it is, I think someone previously mentioned the dress code. So when you're coming in, you don't need to wear like a specific Sunday school church clothes. You just feel comfortable, and it's a big family bond. So when you leave that, you kind of miss it like crazy. And then when you come back, that's what really makes Parkland Chapel just so unique. And I think it's the family bond that you have for years with them.
I just say how thankful I am that all of our parents still stuck around, and they stayed in such a small group and still saw the vision of Parkland Chapel. And now we have still like 2 sister churches from it.
You know, this version of Parkland Chapel is a lot different than the one that started in Mike's basement. But the thing that's helped it go on this long is kept the core of just, being, down to earth, allowing people to develop truly a personal relationship with God and their fellow believers.
Just thank you to everybody who may not be super, front and forward in the way that they serve the Lord, but the people who work behind the scenes. I can't name them all, and they wouldn't even mind being named, because a lot of people's calling is not to be front and forward, shaking hands and talking all the time, but it's filling in where there's a need, filling in where the Lord has called them. And that's a super important thing to keep a church like this going and growing, and keep it from getting stale. And it's truly important. And so I'm really thankful for all those people from behind the scenes.
Shout out to Children's Church and youth specifically, especially now that we're doing it both services, so pretty big investment. So, but it's real. Those guys are really the backbone, I would say, of Parkland Chapel.
Shout out to the sound booth.
Booth, yeah. Eric Parrott. Eric Parrott done this for a long time.
Shout out to Melissa Pritchett.
She's home. I think just the prayer warriors. Every church has prayer warriors. There's a lot of churches with great pastors and great youth groups and great children's church, right? And God is the one that's faithful to have used, our parents and Mike. And I don't think they're disillusioned with like why we're here 20 years later. I don't think they think it's them. They know that, I think we've talked about Mike. I think I've seen Mike grow as a man. I've seen my dad grow as a man. I've seen Todd grow as a man. you know, and the amazing wives that they have behind them, or, you know, maybe should be in the spotlight more than their other half. But you know, the prayer warriors, you know, you could name drop Allison Hensley, and you know, there's more. We're grateful for the prayers that you prayed for each of our lives, or for the general kids, and how God has said, yes, I'm gonna change them from this sinner, you know, and you know, he was gonna do that, and he died to give us grace anyway. But he really has impacted our lives through this church, through the people that are at this church. And yeah, thank you for showing up and praying.
Yeah, I definitely want to add on to, in case I haven't, thank you to some of the people here in Parkland Chapel that have prayed for me. You know, if I've ever been in a tough little rut, I'm one to say prayer works, and it is powerful.
I think one that's easily overlooked when starting a church is the business side of that. And this church has really grown from leaps and bounds, from 2 interesting colored buildings to the beautiful church we have now. So just thank you so much for taking the brunt of the fear of the financials, and the fact that this church has been able to run for 20 years without having to ask for the church to support it is, I think, one of the defining characteristics of this church. And I hope that this is something we're able to do for, like someone just said, another 20 years, because it's amazing that this church inspires churchgoers to support it.
Big obvious thanks to Mike and Lucinda for their faithfulness, and you know, Mike wanting to shepherd God's people, and you know, following what God put on his heart 20 years ago, and for Todd and Dave, who were a big influence for a lot of years for me in youth group. My own parents, who'd served in this church for a lot of years, and kind of for me were that example growing up. And all kinds of, I lose count of all the teachers I had in children's church, but Brian and Annette, Lance and Vanessa, Jason and Nikki, like just so many people who have invested my life over the last couple decades, going into adulthood, and I'm going to be forever grateful, and I'm thankful to God for making this the course of my life, to have all these people in it.
I'd say I'm very thankful for children's ministry, and just in general. Now, serving in that capacity, it's tough, man. It is tough. But, I mean, the Lord promises that His word never returns void. So it's being used in some capacity. I don't know how He's using my words to those kids, but just as an encouragement to everybody serving in that capacity, keep serving even when the kids are all the worst, or even when it's a good week and you're just tired. But the Lord's going to use it some way, somehow.
I guess just thinking about all the practical things that everybody that helped start this church had to do, like cleaning out like a literal dump in this building, and like painting.
They found a pickup truck in the old children's church room.
Yeah, and like painting the floors, and everybody doing the VBS stuff like all entirely ourselves, which I guess we still do that. But still, everybody just does it on their own. Like, it was all of our parents doing all the stuff. And then the spiritual work with raising kids and just growing and maturing in your own faith. I guess it would be easy to get discouraged if you don't see the fruit of that right away. So I guess just an encouragement would be just like to know that the work is not in vain, and that we all really appreciate it.
And thank you for the Mike Mingy and Brock Ashley, you know, and Kelly and Angela with them, you know, to be faithful and say, yeah, God, you're taking us away from this place where you've grown our families and changed us and called us, and say, I'm going to go away and pray that God would do that in a different place. And that's what we should be everywhere, to take the gospel everywhere we go.
Just thankful for all the encouragement of just in my life throughout the years to everybody pouring in, growing me, and preparing me to send me out into the world, you know, away from Farmington, away from Parkland Chapel to be on my own. It's not on the thing that was done right away, but it was, once again, like this church, just a step of faith, remaining very faithful, and I bet all of them can say that too. It's just very thankful for the intentional steps they all took in all of our lives, as we've been talking about this whole time, but very thankful and grateful.
I'm Samuel Woodson. I go to Parkland Chapel.
Hi, I'm Shayla Samuel Woodson, and I don't go to Parkland Chapel.
Hi, I'm Girl Hair Samuel Woodson, and I don't go to Parkland Chapel.
Hi, I always have my nose in electronics, Samuel Woodson, and I don't go to Parkland Chapel.
This is the bathroom.
Hi, I'm fashionably late, Samuel Woodson, and I don't go to Parkland Chapel either.
At Parkland Chapel, we have to study our Bibles once a week, and we have luxurious bathrooms.
Where?
That room don't exist anymore. That room don't
The
exist.
bathrooms are nasty. Yeah.
In my late chapel, we also have a very good Egyptian mystery.
Oh. We don't have any t-shirts.
And this guy ain't got no shoes.
Reminisce. Seriously, whatever. Parkland Chapel. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Hang on, dude.
all the standard sounds you can get in there.
Okay. Deeper.